The operating room was silent, save for the low hum of monitors and the steady rhythm of the ventilator. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting an even, clinical glow across stainless steel trays, surgical masks, and one unconscious man lying still beneath the sterile drapes. Dr. Marianne Elwood stood at the center of it all, her gloved hands hovering for a moment above the patient's torso. She had performed this type of procedure more times than she could count, routine, precise, predictable. But today felt anything but ordinary. Her eyes shifted to the chart clipped to the monitor. Patient, Drake, Nathaniel. Age, 41. Status, induced coma following collision trauma. The name meant more outside this room than inside it. In the world beyond these surgical walls, Nathaniel Drake commanded headlines, brokered billion-dollar deals, and sat atop one of the largest biotech companies in the Western Hemisphere. But here, stripped of title and power, he was simply a man, sedated, fragile, and broken in ways that transcended flesh. His blonde hair was slightly tousled despite the surgical cap, his face pale against the light, his chest rising and falling with the breath of machines. Marianne felt the familiar tug of duty pull against the weight in her chest. She had seen many bodies in this same position, some famous, some nameless, and yet none had ever caused her this kind of pause. "Vitals stable," murmured Allison, the head nurse, standing just to her right. Marianne gave a slight nod, adjusting the position of her left hand on the patient's lower abdomen. Her touch was clinical, but there was a softness to it, as though some part of her believed he could still feel it. She didn't believe in miracles, not in the classic sense. But she had seen strange things, patients who spoke through comas, muscles that twitched after death, eyes that opened when no one expected them to. And Nathaniel's case had always felt off. He had been found alone in his car, unconscious but alive, with no sign of collision from the outside. There were no skid marks, no shattered glass, just a body slowly fading from within. And yet, now that he lay before her, it was something else entirely that made her skin prickle. "All right," Marianne said softly, mostly to herself, but loud enough for her team to hear. "Let's begin." The first incision was mapped carefully, a matter of practiced lines and preparation. They were not here for anything life-threatening, not anymore. The emergency had passed. This procedure was about correcting internal strain and performing exploratory repair work. It was supposed to be simple. But as she leaned in to make the first cut, Nathaniel's body shifted ever so slightly. It wasn't enough to stop the room, not at first. A muscle could spasm. An unconscious patient might twitch. But this was different. His lips parted. Barely. A tremble passed over his face like the ghost of a grimace. And then came the whisper, so faint Marianne almost thought it had come from within her own head. "Don't let them take it." She froze. Her scalpel paused midair, her pulse accelerating despite years of conditioning. Allison stepped closer, her eyes wide behind her mask. "Doctor," she asked, voice hushed. Marianne leaned in, ignoring the weight of protocol bearing down on her shoulders. Nathaniel's lips were still again, but his breathing pattern had changed. He was no longer entirely under. Something had pulled him closer to the surface. The words repeated in her mind. "Don't let them take it." What had he meant? She examined his chest, the monitors, the chart. Everything still read normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. Her instincts sharpened as she ordered the team to pause. "Hold the sedation," she said quietly. "Let's evaluate responsiveness." For a few seconds, no one moved. Then, slowly, one nurse reached for the syringe and stepped back. "Mr. Drake?" Marianne said, her voice low, her head lowered close to his. "Can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered. Not once, but twice. His mouth twitched again, and though his voice was dry and nearly lost in the shallow air between them, the next few words were unmistakable. "They're watching, even now." That was enough for Marianne to know this was no normal recovery. She called off the surgery. Not out of panic, but from something deeper, instinct, yes, but also something that felt remarkably like warning. Hours later, after they had moved him to a private recovery suite and ensured his vitals were still stable, she sat at her desk reviewing the surgical scans. That was when she noticed the anomaly, a small, unregistered signal buried deep in the abdominal cavity. It hadn't shown up on any prior scan, yet now, clear as a fingerprint, it pulsed with a weak but measurable frequency. She zoomed in on the scan. Not an organ. Not scar tissue. Something foreign. She cross-referenced the location against standard device implants. Nothing matched. Her brow furrowed as she pulled up his pre-op profile again. Still nothing. No documented medical device. No surgical history. Just a powerful man who had whispered warnings from unconsciousness and carried something inside his body he clearly didn't want them to have. Marianne didn't sleep that night. She stayed at the hospital long after her shift had ended, reviewing the data, the charts, and then reviewing them again. The signal she had found within Nathaniel's body wasn't consistent with any known medical implant. It emitted no identification number, no traceable manufacturer. It pulsed only intermittently, as if hiding itself on purpose. A biomedical engineer she trusted looked at the scan briefly and called it not standard, maybe not legal. That was enough to make her lock the file and encrypt her notes. The next morning, before rounds, she visited Nathaniel's private room. The sunlight was streaming in through the high windows, washing the white walls in soft amber. He was awake now, sitting up slightly with the help of the mechanical bed, his face pale but alert. His eyes met hers as she stepped inside, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "I wasn't sure you'd come back," he said, voice still raw, but steadier than the night before. "I almost didn't," she replied. He nodded faintly, as if he understood the weight behind that answer. Marianne sat in the chair beside him and rested the encrypted tablet in her lap. She didn't open it. "Not yet." "You said something during surgery," she began slowly. "Something about not letting them take it. And then you said someone's watching. I need you to tell me what that meant." He hesitated. His hands were folded in his lap, fingers twitching like someone fighting the urge to run while knowing there was nowhere left to go. 6 weeks ago, he said, I was preparing to publish something. Not just numbers or projections, evidence. My company, we developed a vaccine delivery platform 2 years ago. But someone repurposed it. Quietly. Without my sign-off. They inserted neural tracking technology into the base formula. Biocompatible. Almost invisible. The kind of thing that could change everything, if used wrong. Marianne didn't flinch, though her breath tightened. She let him speak. I found out too late, he continued. And when I tried to stop it, I was pushed out of my own decision chain. My board. My advisors. Some of them were already bought. You were going to go public, she asked. I had the files. I scheduled a press conference. The night before, my car went dead on a country road. No crash. Just blank. And then I woke up here. Marianne didn't speak right away. She took the tablet and opened the scan again, rotating the 3D model so that he could see the embedded signal nestled just beneath his lower rib. His eyes closed as he exhaled. They must have implanted it while I was unconscious, he murmured. To make sure I stayed silent even if I woke up. Marianne turned the screen back toward herself and locked it. Why tell me? You don't even know me. Because when I woke up, I heard your voice. You said you'd take care of me. And when I said those words, don't let them take it, you stopped. You listened. Most people wouldn't. Her fingers tightened around the tablet's edge. She wanted to stay clinical, professional. But part of her knew this had already gone far beyond medicine. I need to remove it, she said. It's not safe in you. And it's not safe for the people around you. But we have to do it quietly. No record. No backup. Nathaniel met her gaze with something almost like relief. I trust you. Later that night, under the cover of low lighting and with a skeleton crew, Marianne performed the second procedure. No one else in the OR knew the full extent of what they were removing, only that it was classified as foreign debris. She extracted the device with meticulous care, sealed the wound, and packaged the implant in a sealed case that never touched the hospital's formal documentation system. 3 days later, Nathaniel was cleared for recovery at home. Before he left, he returned to the hospital, not in a suit, not as a CEO, but in a sweatshirt and jeans, nearly unrecognizable except for the way he moved with quiet urgency. He handed Marianne a small black envelope. Inside were 2 microchips and a note. This is the full documentation, it read. In case anything happens to me again. You're the only one I trust to carry it forward. Marianne didn't ask where he was going. She simply nodded and slipped the envelope into the hidden pocket of her lab coat. Weeks passed. Then months. Whispers of a biotech scandal appeared briefly in a fringe journal but were quickly discredited by larger media outlets. The company's public image remained spotless, and no official story ever surfaced. But Marianne knew better. She kept the chips locked in a private vault and checked the signal daily. There were no pings. The device hadn't activated since removal. One spring afternoon, long after the hospital had quieted for the day, she walked past the surgical floor and paused outside a darkened OR. She stepped inside and stood in the center of the room, the same room where a man had once whispered warnings through a haze of unconsciousness, and a doctor had chosen to believe him. She didn't need recognition. She didn't want headlines. But she knew one thing for certain, in a world where silence was currency, one voice, soft, hesitant, almost drowned beneath the noise, had reached her. And she had answered.